now?
Well, see, okay, this is what I'll say. I don't know if people would necessarily hate Nkrumah. I think there's been a lot of misinformation.
I meant the government.
Yeah, okay, so the
Not
government.
yeah.
Nah.
You're right.
Yes. So I don't think people hate him per se. I think there's a lot of misinformation about him, his legacy, what he was trying to do. And a lot of that does also come from the West, because trying to prevent
the white West.
Things, yes, trying to prevent what he was foreseen for all of Africa.
Exactly.
Which they do to all revolutionary thinking leaders.
Yes.
But I also always like to point out that Nkrumah studied in the U.S. with those who were actively trying to do the same things.
With Du Bois and all of those people.
Yeah, so his thinking was always going to be a little bit different than his people here, because he had another experience. So he's coming, he's seeing what our experience is there. He's learning under some of the great thinkers of that time and revolutionary people from that time, and he's bringing it back to his home country.
Yes.
And there were people here who were like, no, we don't want it like that. And I think what I've noticed just being in Africa in general, Black Americans are a very different type of African.
Yes.
We have a lot more fight, a lot more grit, a lot more like, I'm demanding it now. And so even when you think about Nkrumah, when he came back and was like, no, we need liberation now. And then you have people like, what's his name's uncle, who's like, no, we can do it later. He's like, no, now. And so there comes a conflict. And so even when you think of just the relations between Black Americans, sometimes when we come to Ghana, we have a very intense energy like, oh, well, we can do something about it now. And people are like, oh, well.
And that intense energy, everyone, is being a descendant of slavery.
Yeah.
To be very, very clear. And that's what separates us from a lot of the continent, is that not only just that experience, but particularly how we feel about it.
Yeah.
And how we honor it.
And how we had to, like, recreate a society of people. Like, I feel like we had to recreate our culture.
People. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're talking about, like, coming from somewhere, then going somewhere else, having something totally erased, and you have to recreate what your people are. Yeah, we feel passionate about that. We feel a way about it. And then when we see other people almost like taking their culture for granted, or taking their, because I do think Africans in Africa have certain privileges when it comes to their culture and how they see things and how they view things. Even the luxury of being able to be tribalist. And be like, no, well, I'm Fanti. No, well, I'm Eve. Like, that's a privilege, right? So even that, when we see that, sometimes we are a little bit like, there's a lot more energy behind it than not. But we totally went off when you start talking about being an Africana Studies.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
But yes.
Okay, so something that I learned today, which is a good transition, that the first woman vice president candidate is running this year alongside John Mahama for the NDC party. Her name is Jane Ajimang. And so this is the first woman to run for vice president. And so we see the parallels between Ghana and the U.S. right now with the election. But in particularly, I want to talk to the nomads and the expats. Just off the top of your head, what are some ways that you think nomads, expats, repatriates, how would you say they could be affected by the election? Let's say if there's travel bans, let's say if for whatever reason the borders get closed, what are some ways that you think?
So the first one is just looking at, because I know a lot of people here who are married to Ghanaians. Okay. Right? So when you start thinking about, will my husband, will my wife be able to travel back? Even me, I'm currently kind of like in a situation like that, where can my partner travel back to my home country with me? No, right? Or it's more difficult to get them the visas, to get, all these different things. I had a situation in 2022 where my mother had a surgery that didn't go so well, so I had to rush back. I would have loved for my partner to have been like, okay, I'm joining the plane with you. He would have loved that. But the visa processing to get visas to go to the U.S. is so long, so strenuous, all these documents, all of
Yeah.
this. Even for an emergency situation, you can't go. I know people who have been married to people for years and still were denied a visa to go to the U.S. Even though they're married, they have children, and it's still a no.
Yeah.
So just the idea that, like, your family can't really be connected is an issue for me. And I think that's an issue that a lot of expats, repats, nomads don't think about when they start to partner and produce children or not in this space. It's like, okay, you can go back and forth, but can the people you love in this space also do the same? And sometimes it's just not possible. And then when you have candidates who are anti-immigrant, that makes it even more difficult to even approach the conversation. So now you're like, basically, I live in two worlds, right? I have my family, my friends, people I love there, and I have people that I love here, but they never really get to cross over. Or if they do, it just takes so long for it to happen. So that's one of the first things. The second thing that I look at personally is just the relationship between the two countries. So, you know, there's a lot of talk about how Obama opened Africa back up to the United States for trade, for investment, for military crossing over, all of those type of things, because Africans in general have kind of started to not really trust the United States. So also looking at their foreign policy, I know under the Biden administration, they have a whole diaspora office, right? And so with that office, it's all about the African relations. There's a few key Ghanaians who are actually on that team. And so that's why you kind of see the U.S. and Ghana a lot. There's a lot of trying to till the land again to see if it's fertile to plant something else. So I would look at those things. Those things matter. Also, the reason I say those things matter because when you look at the taxation between certain countries, so like the UK and Ghana have tax agreements where their citizens aren't double taxed. Canada has agreements with Ghana, they're not double taxed. America doesn't, and we are double taxed. So it's like, okay, especially for me as a dual citizen, I get taxed in Ghana. I also get taxed in the United States. So those type of things, those are things I'm looking for. Those are things I think other expats should be looking at, like, how are you going to live well in both places? Which candidate is more likely to support the things that are going to help you live your best life in both spaces, if you choose to live in both spaces? Those are the top two, I think, for me. And then also just globally, how are we relating to other countries? Because that will affect how people in said country view you. So if your global perspective for your country is you're like a international terrorist, well, then the people there are naturally going to not be trusting of you. They're not going to extend this warm hospitality, all of those type of things. So also looking at that, who is a international bully, and in bullying in what spaces and in what manner, and then how does that impact you living in that space?
I agree. I also think even on the Ghana side, for people who either are dual citizens or thinking about citizenship, or people who are like, I don't want to get another citizenship, I just kind of want to move around. One of the things I will say about being politically involved in Ghana as expats, no matter whether you're American, British, Canadian, whatever, your land plays a large role in, or the presidency, the political parties, the chiefs, the kings play a large role in where you can buy land, how accessible land is going to either become or how inaccessible land can become. There's also the GMO issue that's happening in the country. I don't know how much of that goes into politics or elections. Or
it's all politics because the government.
Or I mean, is it something that's on a that people can vote for?
Okay, so what I realized in Ghana, people don't necessarily vote. It doesn't seem like they're voting on issues per se. Right. So you know how like in the States you have a senator and they're like, these are the policies that I'm pushing. I don't really hear candidates talk in that framework.
Okay.
It's more generalized.
Okay.
You know, we want to fix the economy, but then it's like in what specific ways? They may have one or two things, but like when it comes down to policy, what's going to Parliament,
Right.
I don't really hear people talking about that unless it's something in Parliament that is like very controversial, and now the MPs are on TV talking about that specific thing that's gone to Parliament. So I don't really see a lot of conversation about that where people are like, let me pull your voting record from Parliament.
Right.
Nobody's doing that.
Yeah.
Where people are like, I want to see the senator's voting record.
Right.
For, I don't know, Texas.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but it is politicized in the sense that the seedlings are subsidized by the government. So that means that the government is aware that these things are coming in. They've okayed it. They've subsidized it, which means that farmers now are going to naturally want to buy those GMO seedlings and all this stuff because it's cheaper.
Yes.
And if our economy is struggling, I'm going to go with the cheaper option no matter what, because I want to make a profit. I want to feed my family with my profit. So, yeah, I think it is politicized. And even taking it outside of the context of Ghana, if we look at Nigeria, how you have the businessman Dangote who's making the refinery, and the government is interfering in that because the current president has stock in an oil company in Malta. So instead of promoting your own Nigerian to come up with a refinery so your oil you can refine and export out, because you personally, as a politician, have stock somewhere else, you don't want that to happen. So I feel like in Ghana, in Africa in general, I'll say in West Africa specifically, like everything is politicized because the politicians mix their business and the work of the nation all together. Yeah. So all of it goes hand in hand. Best to believe if anything goes through in government in Ghana, somebody is getting paid off of it. Yes. And that's why it's going through. Yeah. And I'll just say this one more thing. I don't think Ghanaians move without money being involved. So even if you come with a really good idea, if that person can't figure out how to make money from the situation, it's probably not going to move very fast. So you have to go and think, okay, I'm going to pay this person, I'm going to pay this person. This is how we can make money on this, and then it will go. So I think everything is all wrapped together.
Yeah, and for people who have dual citizenship or is in the process of that, also think about how the things that you're voting for or the political parties that you're voting for, let's say in America, how they affect other countries as well. Like, it's one thing to vote in America about American issues, but also voting for how America interacts with these other countries. Because a lot of the like GMO conversation and the seed conversation, if you research enough, it'll probably stem back to Bill Gates. And knowing the type of relationships that Bill Gates has and who he's connected to and how that affects GMO creation in Ghana, because so many Black Americans and Jamaicans and people in the Caribbean, a lot of people fell for the marketing that Ghana is the most natural place. There's no GMO. There's no this, and this. And people have that idea. Well, it was. You know,
it has drastically changed.
But now, I think just a couple months ago, you know, the courts ordered for the market people to now state whether something is GMO or not by labeling. I haven't seen it yet, but I just asked now because the mangoes look crazy and it's very like some things are obvious.
If you've been here for a while, you see the difference. So like, okay, I'll say the pineapple. Yes. When I first came to Ghana, you know, the local pineapple are a lot shorter. They're very sweet. The foreign pineapples are very green, taller, slimmer. They have that tanginess that the local pineapples just don't have. When I first came, you could see both of them equally. Now I like have to search for the local pineapples. But we're a massive pineapple producing country. I think like Ghana, Brazil, and there's another country that are like leading pineapple producers. But we don't have our local pineapple in abundance anymore. So I mean, I say that because I've been here for a while. Right. So I can see like the difference. Exactly. I see the difference in the mango. Yes. I see the difference in the local banana. Difference in the taste of the watermelon. Yeah. Also the local bananas. Like, you have to kind of like go out of the city to find those things in large quantities. Yes, there's always some market lady that has it, right? but like to find it how you used to find it, where it was just every, I would say vendor had it, right?
Yeah.
It's not the same anymore. So, but people coming in new, they don't know that.
True.
Yeah, they don't
Yes. Okay. So now this is the last-ish segment where we are going to talk about racial identity in politics. And that includes biracial identity, racial identity. We're going to get into all of that. And so the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because obviously Kamala Harris is now running for the Democratic presidency. And one of the biggest selling points that Trump is trying to sell right now with audacity is that Kamala Harris is not black, right?
She just turned black.
And I wanted to talk about this because I noticed how between Kamala Harris, Amber Rose being used as a Republican pawn, and then Amanda Seales being the clear voice of reason, and then being violently disrespected on social media simply because of what her racial identity is, which is actually what Malcolm X is. And it's embarrassing to watch y'all tell that girl that she's not black.
You know the funny thing, and they're doing all of this to the women. When Obama was running, nobody said Obama wasn't black.
And so let's get into that.
And Obama has a white mother.
Let's get into that. And so I want to get into these things when we say who is and who is not black, right? Because Tyler's going to enter this chat too.
Yeah.
So
I feel a way about how people have responded.
No, we're about to get into it. We're going to get into them all individually because it all plays a role because Tyler just won a BET award.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about it. I think that there's a very big difference in what I mentioned earlier. When there's a reason that I say Black American for me. Because a lot of times I personally feel when some people use the word African, they're categorizing themselves as the people who weren't descendants of slaves. That's how when I talk to a lot of people, a lot of times it can feel as if it's being like weaponized to be kind of separate in a way where it's like, you know, I mean, and you hear it. I've been in a lot of spaces where people don't know that I'm Black American, and I have heard the things be said. And
so what do they think you are? They think you're East African. They think you
everything but
Black American.
But black.
Okay.
And so for me, I specifically say black because I am including the fact that I am a descendant of slavery. I have no interest of identifying myself as anything that kind of glosses over that. And even though I will say I'm an African descent, I prefer to put descendant of slavery or descendant of enslaved Africans at the forefront for me before just Africa. Because yes, sure, but that part I honor the most more than the African actual part. And so when people are talking about blackness in regards to Kamala Harris, it is not justifiable because as a Jamaican, she is affected by the transatlantic slave trade. So it's one thing, yes, her parents are not Black Americans, right?
Yeah.
But her Jamaican side still shares the same identity as technically a Black American because it was just a situation. It wasn't you know what I mean? It doesn't, there's not much that really separates us other than what century we got to each place. Whereas Obama wasn't affected by slavery at all.
Yeah.
Because he was Kenyan and Hawaiian, correct? And so Obama actually was not connected to the transatlantic slave trade, technically. Maybe the East African, the Arab slave trade, his family was probably affected by that. Yeah. But Obama wasn't actually connected in that way that Kamala is, as well as with Kamala being Indian, actual Indian from India, where there's also still a caste society and a even more harsher
by the British,
right, and even harsher caste society than most of the world. So I think that that's really weird that people are classifying her as not black or black because all of that goes away when slavery enters the chat for me. Yeah.
Okay, I think the root of all of this, number one, is funny that this white man is trying to be the marker of what is black and what is not. And then what makes it even funnier is that there are black people who are agreeing to
falling for it, yeah.
So it's like, okay. First of all, it tells me you don't know anything about her. You've not actually followed her. You're just watching clips and you are following whatever
you already
the
feel
clips
a way
say.
about her, so anything that's negative that's being said, you're just going to go with.
A lot of it is because she's a woman, because like I said, nobody questioned Obama's blackness when he was running for president. It was, my president is black. So, and he has a white mother. And if we're being truthful, women are the ones who bestow the culture on their children.
Socialize their children.
Yeah. And so if his mother is white, if we're going to play that game, then I would say, okay, well then Obama is more not black than Kamala.
And white in Hawaii specifically. So that's like neo-colonial.
Yeah. But, I mean, nonetheless, to me, Obama's black. But I'm just saying, like, I think a part of it is she's a woman, so they have to try to find something. Right? Then when you look at, we have a whole population of black people who are in a diaspora war in their mind.
Exactly.
Right? You're black American, you don't consider Jamaicans and Trinidadians and Bajans, and these people aren't black, right? These people are those people. And then you got Africans who are immigrants in the States, and I am Kenyan, I am Zimbabwean, I'm not black, right? So there are people who are doing that thing in their mind. But the reality is, at the end of the day, the U.S. has always been predicated on the same thing, a one-drop rule. If you are mixed with black, you are black. When Kamala is being stopped, nobody who's stopping her is saying, hi, Indian woman.
Right.
You know, I just pulled you over today. Nobody's doing that. They see her and they go like, okay, it's a light-skinned black woman.
Exactly. Yeah.
Coupled with the fact that she, for me, and I could be biased because I'm a Howard alum as well, but she went to Howard. Anybody who's gone to Howard knows that you are indoctrinated. If you were not black when you got there, you black when you leave. Right. So you're going to be indoctrinated into that space. Especially because I also know the department she's coming from. Right. And that was the same department that I was in, so I know what that's like. Coupled with the fact that she's also in a sorority. Give what you may. People have their thoughts about sororities. I also am in a sorority. But when you look at the history of these organizations, all of them really were focused on being socially conscious for their black. So especially like she's coming out of the 80s. I'm thinking 80s Howard, sorority life. It's all blackness. So for her to even say, I want to be a part of an organization like that, and then still to this day rep her organization, knowing what we all put our money towards. And a lot of what we put our money towards is the black community. That's just the truth. Whatever people have their feelings about sororities, where we put our money is in black America. And now that some of us have extended into Africa and other regions, it's still, like right now, Zetas have a chapter in the UK. They're not in the white UK. They're working in the black neighborhoods in the UK. Right. You know, we have a chapter in Ghana. So that all of those things add to the cultivation of her black identity and her being in the midst of the culture. Now, has she married a white man? Yes. But does that mean that she's not black? No. Because if that's the case, all the black men who are married to white women are now not black. People want to talk about her having an Indian mother. To me, it's almost like, I don't like to use the word minority, but she's like a double minority. That's like, I'm sure you're coming from Cali. The girls who have, the Asian girls who have babies with black men, are their children not black now? We never do that when it's an average person. The girl who lives down the street from you that is Puerto Rican, who has a baby with your brother, you don't say your nephew or your niece is not black. So why are we trying to make this up at this point? I think it's quite silly. I think people are just trying to pick at something. And I think that because of the person who's leading the charge, he's also the person who led the charge that Obama was an American. right?
I was going to bring that up. Yeah.
you know, so we have to be careful
because he didn't know Hawaii was now part of, which is embarrassing.
So we have to be careful of who's giving us the information and how much of it we take in.
Yes.
And what we need to throw away.
Yeah. And before we get into the Amber Rose, Amanda Seales thing, I want to talk about something that you mentioned too. Being an immigrant in America, once you get citizenship, you also now can vote.
Yeah.
And so one of the biggest things, and that's why I kind of mentioned the way that I identify, because what is happening in America, the propaganda about being an immigrant is coming from Trump.
Yeah.
But then the reality, right, of being an immigrant, especially an African immigrant, there is a reality of being more privileged in America once you get there as an African person. And a lot of times when African people in America do not feel connected to the Black community, how they vote matters.
Yeah.
There are a lot of Hispanic people that you think would be on the Hispanic people's side, and they are about to vote for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important for these type of conversations when we talk about racial identity in politics and things like that, because regardless of you being a Black American, regardless of you being a white American, once you have American citizenship, you can vote, you can be a Democrat, you can be a Republican. And a lot of people are saying that a lot of immigrants are running towards the Republican side.
Yeah. Okay, I've seen it. So on my social atmosphere, the people I know that are immigrants, a lot of them lean more conservative, right? And then Trump is, quote unquote, the conservative choice. Also, you have to, when we say identity, especially, let's think about African immigrants. They don't lead with Black first.
Exactly.
So when we're saying, but he don't like Black people, they're like, and I'm not Black. What does that mean to me? They're like, I'm here to make money for my family. So who do I think is going to be the candidate that's going to be most attractive to me financially? They're not thinking race loyalty first, because they don't. Race is a illusion anyway, right? It's crazy. It's delusional.
Let's get into the Amber Rose situation. So now that we are a couple weeks after Amber Rose was featured at the Republican National Convention, she also has done an interview with Candace Owens. Did you see that one?
I did not see that one. I probably won't see it.
I didn't watch it either. I've just seen clips, and but I do want to talk about how biraciality, if that is a word, it is definitely a word that I use. If biraciality affects the way that you vote or affects the way that you see politics. A lot of people, like with Amber Rose, she was at the Republican National Convention and she basically endorsed Trump. And so people have this conversation.
Yeah, she found her people. Right.
And specifically, she said she found her people. Did she say she found her tribe?
She said she found her people.
She said that she found her people. And so I want to just talk about the juxtaposition of the Amber Rose who endorsed Trump and then the way that people are treating Amanda Seales just because she has said she is going to vote for Kamala because she doesn't have a choice, but she also is going to hold Kamala accountable. Yeah. And so the argument right now that people are having is that they feel like everyone that I have seen make comments about Amanda Seales, they all say Amanda Seales is not wrong. They just feel like she could be swaying the people who don't really want to vote. Yeah. And because she's coming so hard on Kamala Harris, they feel like being so educated in certain spaces and having certain conversations can still be hard to digest for the average person. And they feel like she's holding Kamala Harris accountable, but the people who might be scared to, or not scared to vote, but the people who are second guessing voting, the people who are like, who am I voting for? They feel like now I'm just not going to vote. Yeah. So, and I want to talk about how I want to talk about those two people in the sense of how racial identity plays a role in the way that we see people talk about politics and the way that we see people represent politics.
Yeah. So with Amber Rose,
because before you say this, how we just came off of the conversation of being an African immigrant in America, how that doesn't automatically mean that you are going to side with what a lot of the Black Americans are asking for. In Amber Rose's case, she claims that she is Cape Verdean.
Not Black.
But when you do research on the population makeup of Cape Verde, and when you look at the history of Cape Verde, it's very similar to South Africa, where you can say you're Cape Verdean, but that does not necessarily mean that you are African nor Black. It could mean you were a descendant of the colonizers who also have been there as well. And I noticed that a lot of times when she brings that up as if that's supposed to solidify her Blackness. But because in Africa you can be African and not be Black, you have to clearly state what that is. And so go ahead.
I think if anybody has turned something, Amber has turned white in the last few years. Because the Amber Rose that I think we were introduced to was an Amber Rose that was a Black woman that was peddling to Black people's spaces, our culture, and trying to be in the mix, right? She's emphasizing how she grew up in Philly. She's emphasizing a Black experience in Philly. Yes, she talks about experiencing colorism as a lighter tone Black woman and how she did, whatever comes with being a lighter tone skinned Black woman. But why are you even talking about colorism if you're not Black? So then if anybody, when they say Kamala is turning Black, well, I think Amber just turned white. She's trying to pass, if we want to talk about it. And I think it's just crazy, again, that we're letting this white man influence how Black people choose to identify. Now, I also think Amber got some daddy issues because the way she glorified her father, I've never heard her speak about her mother that way. I've just never seen her light up in just about her mother and her mother's culture and what that means. But you grew up with your mother, but you are highlighting this Irish and whatever culture now. And I'm like, okay, all right, sis. When it comes to people who are biracial, I grew up with a best friend who was biracial. What I have observed is that there's a conflict. Usually they get to a point where they have to make a decision on where they primarily culturally kind of lean into more. Within my friend's family, I will say her elder brother leaned into whiteness.
Okay.
The middle brother, or the middle child, which is the second child, he plays in between, but he looked like Lenny Kravitz, so he can only play in between but so much. Right. And then she's the darkest one. She's probably like your color, maybe a little bit lighter if she, stays out of the sun. So there was really no questioning. But I still found, like when we were younger, her trying to figure out, like, everybody sees me as Black. For those who are biracial, I think it's okay to identify both. Yeah. But I definitely think that there is one of the cultures you're going to lean into a little bit more. Unfortunately, if you are a biracial person living in the United States and you are mixed with Black, you're going to be Black. That's just what it is. Yeah. Right? Because other people are not identifying you any other way. The reason the orange man decided to get her is because he wanted her to be a representation of the Black community. Meanwhile, she's up on the stage telling you about her Irish white daddy. But these people don't see you as that. Yeah. So even if you want to identify with that, you can show honor to your other side. But at the end of the day, because of the society and the construct that you're in, by default, that's what you're going to be. You spoke about Amanda Seales. I think people want Amanda to shut up, right? And they want her to shut up because it's hard to take the truth. It's hard. And because I feel like Amanda's been on Kamala's ass for a long time. Right.
As VP.
Yes, she has been on her for a long time. So this is not new. I think they just want her to shut up because people are in this desperate state of, well, we just don't want him to win. We don't want him to win. So anything negative against her may persuade somebody else. The truth of the matter is the people who are voting for Trump, they're not changing. They've been that way. They're going to be that way. Then there's people who are voting for Kamala that are not changing. There are people who are somewhere in the middle where Kamala Harris will have to do some work to persuade them. Arab Americans, she is not on their top of the list right now. There are some Black Americans who don't know what they want to do. They're thinking about third-party voters, this and that. But her saying we want Kamala to do this, this, and this for our community, I think is going to sway those people away from voting for her. Because if you are a Black person who cares about Black people, I just don't see how you can vote for Trump. It doesn't really matter what she says at this point. Why you wouldn't vote for him anyway. And if you are thinking about it, then you're misguided from the beginning. So what Amanda is saying is not really affecting you. I think it's all... The industry has been hating on Amanda for a while. Yeah. They want her to be quiet because she speaks a lot of the truth. She says uncomfortable things. And I think it's even crazier that people are trying to paint her as not Black. Yeah. Like, because her parents are from the island. Well, one parent is from the islands. One is Black American. Now she's not Black. People cut it out. Like, Black people cut it out. If the police stop you, they stop Amanda, she is Black. Right. And even if you're from the islands, you're Black. They're not telling Rihanna she not Black. They're not telling Nicki Minaj she not Black. They didn't say Marcus Garvey wasn't Black. Malcolm X was. What is Malcolm X Black? Like, if we're going to go down the rabbit hole of people from the islands not Black, there's a whole bunch of liberation and freedom fighters we have to X off the list. A whole bunch. If we saying biracial people not Black, Frederick Douglass is not Black. Bob Marley. You know, these people, so there's a lot of people we got to take off of our pictures in our houses. Obama, take him off the wall. Everybody has to come off the wall if that's the marker. And I think it's stupid for us to make that the marker. When the truth is, we need collective numbers that benefit us. And we are better together than separated. And Amber is a clown. That's my last word. Amber Rose. Period. Okay, guys. So I think that's our last segment. We are wrapping up, so I just want to say thank you for coming, being a part. Yes. I'm glad that we had this conversation. So, yes, so for those of you who are expatriates, repatriates, nomads, new citizens, dual citizens, you know, you have more than one passport, however you got it, I think that this election year is really, really important. If you can vote in more than one place, I would say vote. And I would say have a international political framework, not just thinking about America and Ghana, but especially if you are the diaspora or native Ghanaians who go back and forth, take advantage of that knowledge of how your country affects America, how America affects Ghana, and just be more a part of the conversation. Can I say one more thing about how you can vote? Yes. So if you are American living in Ghana, you have to, first of all, you need to know what your stipulations are for your state, right? So find out if your state will do a mail-in ballot. If so, there's a certain website you can go to, download the ballot, and send it in. But there's deadlines for different states. The U.S. Embassy will give you that information. I know, I speak for my organization, we're doing a event on the 17th at Daiquiri Bar, so you can come get your daiquiri and learn how to vote abroad. I know African American Association will do it. I think the AKAs are doing one. We're doing like 3 in a row, so it's like the AKAs will do one. The 17th is the Zetas. The 18th is African American Association of Ghana. So at those events, and I'll give you the information, you can share it. They'll tell everybody how to vote while you're here. If you are in Ghana, you have until September 5th to register. So I'm a dual citizen. I'm already registered, but for any Ghanaian watching, any person who also has dual citizenship in Ghana, you need to register by the 5th of September. After that, you won't be able to, which means you won't be able to vote. So, yes. All right. And that is a wrap. Bye. Guys.